Good evening and thanks for joining us. We begin with breaking news. Iran has made good on its threat tonight and launched missile attacks on bases inside Iraq, targeting bases where U.S. troops and coalition forces are based. This is unverified video believed to be from Al-asad airbase. The Pentagon confirms more than a dozen ballistic missiles hit at least 2 bases inside Iraq. The missiles fired from inside Iran. Al-Asad Air Base is a sprawling complex in the western Anbar Desert. The other base hit is in Erbil. The White House says President Trump has been briefed. The extent of the damage or casualties is not clear, though it's reported there have been some casualties among Iraqi forces. Iranian state TV says it is in retaliation for the drone strike ordered by President Trump that killed General Qassem Soleimani, an act Iran calls an assassination. It vowed revenge, though it has said, like the U.S., that it does not want a wider war. Earlier today, President Trump said he would retaliate if Iran attacked. The question is, what will he do now? Let's go to our Washington Bureau Chief, Jackson Proskow. Jackson, there's still lots of information coming in. What are you hearing?
Donna, we know from the Pentagon that this attack began about 3 hours ago. It involved more than a dozen missiles being fired from inside Iran, targeting those air bases in Iraq, as you mentioned, that house U.S. troops. This is the exact scenario that the U.S. had been preparing for, and essentially that Iran had warned that it would carry out in retaliation for the killing of General Soleimani. The Iranians had made it clear that they would launch direct attacks in response and wouldn't rely on their proxies, and the Americans came to believe that those direct attacks would be on U.S. forces in the region. So they were prepared for this, likely hunkered down. As you mentioned, there are early reports of Iraqi casualties. The Pentagon says it is still carrying out a damage assessment at those bases and is still waiting to see exactly how much damage there is before determining what kind of response there will be. As we understand it, there have been at least 2 waves of ballistic missile attacks from Iran tonight. But again, the details still unfolding at this hour.
Jackson, if any Americans have been killed, how might that influence President Trump's response?
It's going to be a very tricky and delicate situation for the White House. At this hour, we understand that President Trump is monitoring the situation from the White House Situation Room. The ball is effectively now in his court. He has to decide if or how he responds to this attack. Obviously, that will depend on the magnitude of the damage and the attack itself. Earlier today, though, he issued a stern warning from the Oval Office that any Iranian retaliation would be met with a full-throated American response.
I like to obey the law, but think of it. They kill our people, they blow up our people, and then we have to be very gentle with their cultural institutions. But I'm okay with it. It's okay with me. I will say this. If Iran does anything that they shouldn't be doing, they're going to be suffering the consequences, and very strongly.
Perhaps there is some room to dial things back here. You heard the president make reference to cultural sites today and how he might try and avoid him. That is a change in tone from earlier this week when he said he would target Iranian cultural sites. That would violate international law. So, Donna, perhaps if he's willing to step back there, all-out war can be avoided. It's all going to unfold very rapidly, and we'll be watching closely over the next few hours.
All right, Jackson Proskow in Washington, thanks. And tonight, the Iranian Revolutionary Guard warned if there is U.S. retaliation, there will be another wave of attacks that they say will wipe out U.S. bases in the region. The Trump administration said earlier today it's not looking for a war, but it is preparing for one. An immediate reaction force from the 82nd Airborne is being deployed, part of 3,500 troops on their way to the region. They've been told to leave their cell phones and personal electronic devices behind because of operational security. They will join the already massive American presence. The U.S. has about 50,000 military personnel on land and at sea in the Middle East and in Afghanistan. They're based in Iraq, Kuwait, Bahrain, Qatar, the UAE, Saudi Arabia, Oman, and Jordan, plus roughly 14,000 troops in Afghanistan. All those troops, as we saw tonight, are targets for possible attacks from Iran. And about 500 Canadian troops are caught in the middle of this. There are no reports of any Canadian casualties tonight, though some of our troops are now being moved out of Iraq. where they've been training Iraqi soldiers to fight the so-called Islamic State. In a letter to military families, Canada's top general said earlier today some of our people will be moved temporarily from Iraq to Kuwait. Simply put, we are doing this to ensure their safety and security. The Iranian parliament today designated the entire U.S. military and the Pentagon as terrorist organizations. It considers the killing of General Qassem Soleimani an assassination, even a possible war crime. In Soleimani's hometown, so many clamored to be near his burial that people were crushed. More than 50 died and more than 200 others were injured. Redmond Shannon reports on a chaotic and tense day in the Middle East.
More enormous crowds, this time in Qassem Soleimani's hometown of Kerman. It seemed like every vantage point was taken to say farewell to the Iranian military commander. The mass of people swarmed to get near a national hero turned martyr. But at some point, something went very wrong. A stampede, not surprising in these crowds, but shocking in its outcome. Dozens killed and hundreds injured, compounding the city's grief. The burial had to be delayed, but the messages for the US remain just as strong. Crowds repeating the words of the commander of the Islamic Revolutionary Guard, chanting for revenge. In Tehran, lawmakers voted to designate the US Army and Pentagon as terrorist organizations.
What Trump has essentially done by killing Qassem Soleimani in this extrajudicial way is he's given the Islamic Republic the greatest gift that they could possibly ask for in terms of media, in terms of, legitimizing themselves.
A much-needed diversion for the regime after its deadly crackdown on anti-government protests in November. But the hardships felt by many Iranians are also widely blamed on US sanctions. Sentiments the regime may now take advantage of.
Probably going to witness a very highly securitized environment inside of Iran because of these events.
The British government repeated its support of Soleimani's killing as it works with France and Germany to try to revive the Iranian nuclear deal.
No one should be under an illusion that long before the death of General Soleimani, Iran had stepped up its destabilizing activities in the region.
Qassem Soleimani may now be buried, but his full legacy has yet to be written. Redmond Shannon, Global News, London.